So, Hosik, are we live now?
Yes, we are now in live.
Okay. And I'd like to say greetings to everyone on the call, and thank you for joining us today. While we wait for perhaps a few others to join us, I'll introduce myself. My name is Karina Larson, and I'm the Knowledge and Communications Manager for the Climate Technology Center and Network, or Ctcn. And I'm really pleased to welcome you today to this event where we'll share some emerging lessons from the first few months of the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, and also explore some best practices in fostering and scaling up innovation in adaptation technologies. The AFCIA program was launched last year by the Adaptation Fund to foster innovation in adaptation practices in vulnerable countries. And the Ctcn, through its co-host, the UN Environment Program, and together with UNDP, were selected to administer the Accelerator. So today we'll hear opening remarks from institutional leaders regarding the Accelerator. And then some of my Ctcn colleagues will provide an overview of AFCIA implementation and some of the lessons that are emerging, both from a global perspective as well as from the Asia-Pacific region specifically. And then finally, we'll engage in a discussion on what types of enabling factors are helping to foster innovation in adaptation technologies. And this will be led by my colleague from UNIDO, Mr. Alois Malanga. So I'm just going to see if we have, yeah, I think that we could go ahead and start with our opening remarks. And our first remarks will be made by video by Mr. Mikko Olikainen, who is the manager of the Adaptation Fund. And so, Hosik, if you could kindly play the video now.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, participants and partners. It's really a great pleasure to join this webinar on emerging lessons from the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, or AFCIA. The AFCIA was announced by the Adaptation Fund with its partners Ctcn, UNEP, and UNDP at the COP25 conference in Madrid in December 2019. It was launched in November last year. AFCIA is an excellent complement to the Adaptation Fund's other work. As of April 2021, the Adaptation Fund has supported over 120 concrete projects covering over 100 countries with more than $830 million in support. The fund has been supporting innovation throughout its history by pioneering new finance models such as direct access and enhanced direct access. The fund has also provided services that help empower national institutions such as the fund's readiness program. The fund's innovation facility emerged from the fund's strategy aiming to accelerate, encourage, and enable innovation for effective long-term adaptation to climate change. It is aligned closely with the Paris Climate Agreement, which calls innovation critical for an effective global response to climate change. The facility further builds on the fund's core strengths and comparative advantage as a highly functioning and innovative fund that has been financing concrete adaptation projects in developing countries that are particularly vulnerable to climate change. The innovation facility offers small and large grants through three different windows. First, small grants through direct access modality, which makes available financing of up to $250,000 to national implementing entities accredited to the fund. So far, our board has approved 4 such innovation small grants for a total amount of about $1 million. For example, the innovation small grant in Armenia is bringing an existing technology and concept that is online digital education to a new context of upskilling youth on climate adaptation in Armenia. In Chile, the grant is helping to develop urban points for water distribution that can function under a drought catastrophe and are easily replicable in other parts. Second, Large grants for innovation is a new window which was approved at our most recent board meeting and which provides grants of up to $5 million to the fund's accredited implementing entities, including national, regional, and multilateral entities. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, AFCIA, which is the focus of this webinar, has been designed to push the envelope even more by opening new opportunities for communities, associations, businesses, young innovators, civil society, local governments, and others. AFCIA aims to test innovative adaptation practices and technologies that further foster and accelerate innovation in adaptation to help meet the enormity and speed of climate change in vulnerable communities, as well as compounding challenges of COVID-19, while generating an effective evidence base that can lead to scale-up opportunities and transformational change. On this note, I would like to wish you all a successful webinar and hope that through AFCIA, countries are further able to bridge adaptation gaps and mitigate the impacts of climate change on vulnerable communities and ecosystems through innovative and cross-cutting solutions. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Okay, so now I would like to invite Ms. Jessica Troney, who is the head of UNEP's Climate Change Adaptation Unit, to provide remarks. Jessica?
Thank you, Karina. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Dear esteemed participants, it's my pleasure and honour to offer opening words at this Lesson Learned webinar on behalf of UNEP. My name is Jessica Troney. I head up the Adaptation Unit at UNEP based in Nairobi. UNEP's approach to adaptation is to promote nature as part of the mix of measures in a country's adaptation strategy and to provide support on developing policy and planning frameworks that incorporate nature and ecosystem services for adaptation. We've implemented over 50 projects on climate change adaptation at global, regional and national levels for over 50 countries, of between $5 to $20 million in grant finance, and where we would typically test and scale up adaptation technologies to meet adaptation challenges. But these investments are a micro proportion of what's needed globally. And so the market for climate change adaptation technologies is potentially very large indeed. 2020 was, in addition to COVID-19, the year of intensifying climate impacts. Floods, droughts and storms which affected over 50 million people, while wildfires devastated forests and communities. These impacts will only worsen as climate change worsens. UNEP's emissions gap report illustrated in 2020 that we're not doing enough to cut greenhouse gas emissions. And so based on Paris Agreement commitments provided in nationally determined contributions, the world is heading for at least a 3-degree temperature increase this century, which would bring about widespread disruption and destruction without adaptation. These levels of climate change need high levels of technology uptake for adaptation. The 5th edition of the UNEP Adaptation Gap Report, released in January 2021, finds that while we may be gathering pace in our efforts, we're still losing this vital race to adapt. The same report highlighted that adaptation is expected to cost between 140 billion to 300 billion annually by 2030 and 280 billion to 500 billion annually by 2050. The only way to minimize these costs, losses and damages is to win the race to adapt. And so UNEP is proud to be in partnership with Ctcn in this Technology Accelerator program. We've had one call for proposals and we are soon to close another. The application process is simple. I would encourage all those who have technology development or application ideas to apply. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jessica. And now I'd like to invite Ms. Akiko Yamamoto, who is the regional team leader for Asia Pacific for Nature, Climate and Energy for UNDP. Akiko, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here joining colleagues from Adaptation Fund, Climate Technology Center Network, UNEP and UNIDO colleagues for the first cross-regional workshop, the webinar to discuss emerging lessons from the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, or AFCIA. Oh, AFCIA? Yeah, I think. Yeah, AFCIA. As the world strives to build forward better from COVID-19 and countries strengthen their climate pledges ahead of COP26, it is critical that innovation in adaptation and locally led adaptation actions prioritized and scaled up. The AFCIA is a critical program to support this global agenda and contribute significantly to the Global Commission on Adaptation. UNDP, UNEP, Ctcn will provide small grants to developing countries to support innovation for effective long-term adaptation to climate change. This program has started implementation in November 2020. In addition to $5 million from the Adaptation Fund, thanks to the financial support provided by the European Union, UNDP can now provide direct grant funding to applicants on a competitive basis up to $15 million in total under the AFCIA grant window. Selected grantees will operate and manage their projects by themselves with support from UNDP. And they develop, diffuse, innovative adaptation practices, tools, and technologies that will result in improved climate resilience of the targeted beneficiaries. Grant funding is open to not-for-profit civil society organizations, including other associations, cooperatives, or community-based organizations registered in a developing country. We will work closely with the UNEP Ctcn's technical assistance funding window, especially around the global advocacy, knowledge sharing, and communication. UNDP has received close to 400 applicants responding to our first call and completed the first round of review. The review process is ongoing. We hope to award the first set of grantees by mid-2021. While it's still an early stage of the program implementation, we would like to share 3 early lessons from our review of applications. The first, the understanding of the climate change adaptation and what adaptation actions mean are still limited at the local level. The overall understanding of climate change adaptation at the local level is not well differentiated from climate change mitigation. Many applications that we received are about renewable energy or energy efficiency ideas. And we need to, this shows that we need to communicate adaptation actions much better in the future. Second, the definition of innovation is not clear enough. At the moment, we are taking an expansive view on innovation, including technology, business model, practice, and social change. In reality, this is often very hard to justify and evaluate. And so, what's clearly innovative, and what is eligible for this grant finance. The third, demand for support on locally led adaptation is abundant. Both UNDP and UNEP Ctcn received a lot more applications than expected. There's a huge need to support locally led adaptation and adaptation innovation. The global community should expand the support in this space and conduct more programs like AFCIA. Once the locally led innovative adaptation actions are identified and supported through AFCIA, we need to ensure that AFCIA creates the strong evidence base for scale up. For that purpose, a cross-regional dialogue like this among practitioners, grantees, and stakeholders will play a critical role. I would like to thank UNEP, Ctcn to have organized this workshop to discuss early lessons. I hope this workshop and the webinar will also deepen our collective understanding of the innovation and what types of proposals should be prioritized for future AFCIA support. I wish you all an open, interactive, fruitful dialogue through this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Akiko. And finally, I'd like to invite the Ctcn Advisory Board Chair, Mr. Ping Zhang, to provide welcoming remarks. Ping?
Hello, thank you, Karina. Hello, colleagues and participants of this event. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Ping Zhong, currently serve as the chair of the advisory board of Ctcn. So firstly, we'll use this opportunity to give you a very brief introduction of the Ctcn. The Ctcn is part of the technology mechanism of the UNFCCC and is mandated to promote accelerated technology transfer at the request of developing countries, which will support them to fulfill their Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. The Ctcn has served over 100 countries, providing targeted interventions that enable countries to make progress in their transition to climate resilient, low carbon economies. The Ctcn delivers technology assistance through a unique global network of over 630 technology experts from academia, civil society, finance, and private sector, and research institutions in close collaboration with its national focal points from over 160 countries worldwide. And 2020 has been a defining year for climate change actions. 5 years after the Paris Agreement was adopted, we saw enhanced pledges and commitments to net zero emission around mid-century, as well as enhancement of climate resilience at local and national level. So for Ctcn, 2020 was the second year of operationalization of the technology framework of the Paris Agreement, providing a structure through which to align the mandate and activity of the UNFCCC bodies and the technology mechanism with the objective of the Paris Agreement. So in November 2020, as mentioned by many of my colleagues previously, funded by Adaptation Fund, the UNEP, Ctcn, and UNDP jointly launched the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, the AFCIA, offering respectively technical assistance and grant funding to developing countries. So the program will, the Ctcn, through the Ctcn window until 2025, will support implement the 25 technical assistance projects for value of up to the $250,000 each to enhance climate resilience and adaptation to climate change in developing countries. So as you may know, the first call of the submission of the applications to the UNEP Ctcn opened from November 18, 2020 till January 31, 2021, and attracted great attention from the developing countries in Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America and Caribbean regions. Through this webinar, participants will have an opportunity to know the status of the implementation of the AFCIA program to date, and early lessons learned emerging from the first round of the applications. So by closing, over the past years, the Ctcn has successfully fostered enhanced collaboration with operating entity of the UNFCCC financial mechanism, including the Adaptation Fund. And the work of Ctcn is important to support developing countries post-pandemic socioeconomic recovery and respond to the commitment outlined in their nationally determined contribution, the NDCs. The AFCIA will contribute to facilitating Ctcn's work, providing high-quality technical assistance projects to developing countries to test, evaluate, roll out, and scale up innovative adaptation practices, products, and technologies. The advisory board is committed to continue its guidance and support to the operation and management of the AFCIA program. And I wish the webinar of today will be a successful one, and all of you will have the information you want from this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ping. We'll now move to the next part of this session, but before we do, I'd like to just mention that should you have any questions during the various presentations and discussion, you can feel free to post them in the chat section, and we'll do our best to either answer them in the chat section or to raise them during the Q&A period later on after the panel discussion. So now I would like to introduce my colleague, Mr. Hosik Chon, who is the Ctcn Adaptation Specialist for Asia Pacific. And Hosik will be sharing some of the impressions from an international perspective of the first months of AFCIA program. Hosik?
Thank you, Karina. Good afternoon and good evening, all participants. This is Hosik Chon, and I'm an adaptation specialist for Asia and the Pacific region working at the Ctcn. Before starting my presentation, I would like to say thanks all participants for their interest in the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator and their participation in the webinar. In my presentation, I will first provide you with a short introduction to the AFCIA. Then I will present a brief overview of the implementation of the AFCIA administered by Ctcn so far. Lastly, I will share early lessons learned from the first round of the AFCIA call. First, I will briefly introduce the AFCIA. The Adaptation Fund launched a new $10 million USD program that we called AFCIA at COP25 in Madrid 2019. And this program is expected to support innovation for effective long-term adaptation in developing countries. As explained by Akiko and also the Ping, Ctcn and UNDP has received $5 million USD each to administrate the AFCIA and offer technical assistance and grant funding respectively to support innovation in adaptation in developing countries. The objective of the Ctcn program in the AFCIA is to support developing countries to test, evaluate, roll out, scale up innovative adaptation practice, products, and technologies. Until 2025, the Ctcn will implement 25 technical assistance projects up to 250,000 each to enhance climate resilience and adapt to climate change in developing countries. Moreover, knowledge sharing and the exchange of best practice will be facilitated through program webpage and UNAP Ctcn communication channels. From this slide, I will present a short overview of the implementation of UNAP Ctcn program so far. In order to officially start the program, virtual inception workshop was held on 28th October 2020 last year. This representative from the UNFCCC, the Adaptation Fund, UNEP, and the Ctcn provide opening remarks in the workshop, and overall information and application process of the UNEP Ctcn program were introduced to 186 participants. With this, the joint launch event was organized together with the Adaptation Fund, UNEP, and UNDP on 18th November 2020. Following the high-level speakers from Adaptation Fund, UNDP, UNEP, Ctcn, the Global Commission on Adaptation, and Youth and Indigenous Leader, UNEP Ctcn and UNDP programs were introduced to 743 participants through 2 separate sessions for participants from Asia Pacific region and America, Europe, and Africa regions. Introduction to the UNEP Ctcn program was also provided through events such as UNFCCC Climate Dialogue 2020 and Youth Climate Innovation Labs and a webinar for Latin America and Caribbean, coordinated by the Ctcn. Social media, Ctcn newsletter, and Global Adaptation Network newsletters have been also used to promote the program and the calls for the application submission. The first call for application was opened from 18th November 2020 to 31st January this year. In order to promote the first call for applications, the Ctcn directly reached out to the national focal points, to the Ctcn and the Adaptation Fund, as well as its core partners, including network members, consortium partners, and knowledge partners, etc. Moreover, various UNEP Ctcn communication channels and social media platforms were used to promote the first call for application. As a result, very much attention could be attracted from the developing countries and the potential applicants. In total, 71 applications were received during the first period, the period of the first call for applications. And after initial screening and completeness checking, 47 applications moved to the next stage for the evaluation. From this slide and the next slide, I will provide you with a short overview of the evaluated applications in the first round of the call. 47 applications, as I mentioned earlier slide, selected for evaluations, was submitted by 27 developing countries. Of these countries, 10 countries are in Asia and Pacific region, which include Cambodia, Georgia, Iran, Kyrgyzstan, Maldives, Mongolia, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, and Uzbekistan. Of 27 developing countries, about 48% are least developed countries, whereas about 11% are small island developing states. Of 47 applications, 18 applications came from countries in Asia Pacific, 3 applications from LAC, and 26 applications from Africa. As you can see in the figure on the right, agriculture, rural development, and food securities were major adaptation sectors of concern identified in the application. In evaluating 47 applications, 3 elements were considered to identify innovation in adaptation technologies, and they include a new, existing, or improved technology, a hard or soft technology, and a scalable technologies. By using evaluation criteria, the applications were evaluated and the top scoring application was selected. In the first round of the call, considering the regional balance, 2 top scored applications were selected from Asia Pacific, and 1 application and 2 applications with top scoring was selected from RAP and Africa, respectively. Further information on the selected 2 applications in Asia Pacific will be provided in the following session by Ms. Clara Landero, Ctcn Regional Manager for Asia and Pacific. As the last part of my presentation, I will share overall only lessons learned from the first call for application. From the first call for application, we have found that there is a large appetite and need for adaptation-related technical assistance in developing countries. Developing countries continue, in particular, LDC and Cs, continue to need support to articulate their adaptation technology needs. Moreover, we have also found that the initiatives to improve capacity to identify and assess innovative adaptation practice, products, and technologies targeting LDCs and Cs needs to be rolled out. With this, we have also identified that the guidance on the application submission process need to be provided to the NDE and the designated authority, as well as potential applicants in the developing countries. Last but not least, we have also understood that where the applications are cross-sectoral in nature, a combination of adaptation and mitigation technologies should be considered and encouraged to generate transformative impact. I would like to inform you that you can now submit your application via the program webpage. The second call for submission of application is now open until the end of April. Please check the information on the application submission processes via the program webpage if you are interested in submitting your applications. Moreover, if you want to know more about the program, please visit the program webpage. Due to the limitation of time, I could not present them, but I have included several slides at the last part of my presentation to introduce where and how to apply to UNEP Ctcn program. If you are interested in, please find my presentation on the Ctcn website after this webinar. So this is all my presentation. Thank you for attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hosik. And now we'll move into the deep dive section of the event, where I'd first like to introduce Ms. Clara Landero, who is the Ctcn Regional Manager for Asia Pacific. And Clara, could you tell us a little bit about the trends that you've been seeing so far in terms of the AFCIA program in the Asia Pacific region?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to most of you. Yes, I think I covered the globe. Let me share my screen and I'll do just that. Let's have a little patience with me here. I hope you're getting my screen now. No, it takes a little time to get the full screen. Yes, I think you're seeing it right now. So here's what I would like to talk to you about today is, and let me see if I can get rid of this. Okay, so I will run you through, I know we're a bit late on time, but I would like to run you through some of the results of the AFCIA first call in the Asia Pacific region, and then go through some frequently asked questions that we have. Why were these projects selected? Which projects were selected? What became of my project idea and my submission if I was not selected? What happened to those? And then really go through some final thoughts and next steps, looking ahead. So here's the, I don't know exactly how to see the full screen. Sorry about this. I keep seeing my faces. Oops. So here's the results from AFCIA first call. So as Hosik mentioned, we had a pre-screening process, and for Asia Pacific, we received, I believe, 25, but we shortlisted 18 applications after the screening processes. And what we saw is that most of those applications shortlisted were focusing on rural development, agriculture, and water management in the Asia Pacific. We were a bit surprised that there were no submissions of technology concepts on coastal zone management or marine fisheries. So probably in this second call, some more will show up in that, because that's a major, we know that's a major adaptation sectors that are really relevant for this region. Those 18 applications shortlisted, they came from 10 Asia Pacific countries. And of those applications, we selected 2, Nepal and Maldives. And so I would like to tell you a bit about the Maldives, both cases. And Maldives submitted a proposal on the establishment of a skimming well gallery system for agriculture use. As you know, Maldives is a small island developing state. And the Ministry of Environment has submitted this proposal. And they had a very well-defined problem, clearly linked to climate change adaptation. Water scarcity is one of the major challenges in the islands, and the freshwater length is increasingly being threatened by climate change, compounded with over-extraction of groundwater through dug wells and poor agriculture practices. So current extraction systems are not adequate for shallow aquifers. So the proposal really aims at exploring sustainable and cost-effective adaptation technologies for groundwater extraction, and replacing, this is to replace existing point extraction methods with horizontal skimmed extraction through infiltration galleries. They also propose to add a few other activities, raise awareness of agriculture communities on good agriculture practices and water management for the islands, and very important to establish a monitoring system for groundwater. They also point to, if this is to be successful, then there is a great replication potential for other islands in the Maldives and also other islands in the region. And they made a clear linkage with NDC. So this is one of the priorities in the NDC, in the updated NDC of the country. Now, moving to the second selected proposal, application for AFCIA, that comes from Nepal, and they have proposed to scale up to develop and scale up a customized weather climate information system for climate resilience agriculture. LDC, Nepal is, as you know, an LDC, and this is a proposal that was submitted by Small Earth Nepal. Again, a well-defined problem clearly linked to climate change adaptation. Loss of agriculture productivity is really showing very clear linkages with climate change, and especially to farmers in remote mountain areas. And this is in spite of the big steps the government has made in developing and making available weather forecast information. So the Meteorological Department now has available centrally and on the website 3-day forecast maps with this information. However, the existing information is not reaching farmers in remote areas. So the Small Earth Nepal and other stakeholders are piloting, they propose to pilot and scale up a mechanism to disseminate local location-specific weather forecast information to farmers through a customized app that would distribute this customized information through SMS, through mobile phones. They also proposed additional activities as building capacity of farmers to use this weather information. And they propose also to update and use and establish new community learning centers that would be hubs for agrometeorological knowledge to local people. And they want to institutionalize, they propose how to institutionalize this process. Also great potential for application from one pilot area they want. It could go to other remote areas, remote rural areas in Nepal. And this has one, this type of project really falls in nicely and links to NAP, to the National Adaptation Plan of the country, and enhances other projects that are already being implemented, such as the Climate Smart Village project. And it would add to this component. So why were these two submissions selected? As you know, in AFCIA first call, the target was to select only 2 of the proposals from those submitted, and these were the ones that scored highest. So as proposals are submitted to AFCIA and they're shortlisted, of the 18 shortlisted for Asia Pacific, they were reviewed, evaluated, and through 13 criteria, and those criteria have been scored. The proposals have been scored against these 13 criteria, and these are the 2 that scored the highest. So what do they have in common? They have a well-defined problem, clearly linked to climate change. They make the case that they contribute to national adaptation priorities, and they propose to test or scale up innovative technologies in their respective contexts. They also clearly point for the potential for replication. And in this case, both in Maldives and Nepal, they are priority countries for AFCIA. One is a small island developing state and the other one a least developed country. Both countries priority for AFCIA. So, so I cannot see the bottom of my screen, sorry about that, but I think the question is, these two countries were, after they scored highest, we contacted the NDs of the country and the project proponents, and we asked this question that's often asked to us: can the project proponent, me, an implementer, and the clear answer is no, and people that are applying, the submissions that are coming in, the project proponents need to know this. So this is a technical assistance program, and project proponents will not be implementers of this. Let me move on. So what happened? Other frequently asked questions that you're probably thinking about. What happened to project ideas which were eligible for AFCIA but were not selected? We have 3 examples: the Mongolia, Cambodia, and Pakistan. Mongolia presented a submission on climate resilience for livestock farming communities. Cambodia presented a proposal on climate risk assessment and developing a climate information system for subnational level adaptation. And Pakistan submitted a proposal for improving adaptive capacity of the water sector through surface rainwater harvesting technology adoption. So these were very good proposals. They just didn't score as high, but because they were such good proposals for adaptation, we have taken up, Ctcn has taken up, and they're now being reviewed to be for technical assistance support with Ctcn and other resources other than adaptation funds. So they will go into the Ctcn regular track for support. Now, there were other good project ideas that were not eligible to AFCIA, but they were nonetheless very good project ideas. We have 2 other cases, and we're still under discussions to see whether the linkages and the benefits, the impact of those projects, if they have great impact both on adaptation and mitigation side. So, and if we can really find that, tweak those project proposals to get those transformational impacts for adaptation and mitigation, Ctcn will also pick up and probably offer support to those projects for the implementation of those projects. Now, what project ideas and proposals were not eligible? The most common reasons we noted in the African, in the Asia Pacific submissions is that one very common one was that proposals coming in were not from an eligible country. So those were screened out. Yeah. So India, for example, was very interested in AFCIA, submitted a few proposals, but they have a accredited entity with the adaptation fund, so they can access directly those funds, and therefore they're not eligible to AFCIA. So the recommendation here, as you're looking at the 2nd and 3rd round of calls for AFCIA, is please check first whether or not your country is eligible or not to AFCIA, and that information is on the website. Other common reasons is that the proposals were not clearly linked to climate change adaptation, and even though they may be a sound environmental sustainable development project, they were not clearly climate change adaptation. So it's really crucial that you draw the linkage to climate change adaptation in your proposal. Also, it is important to link it to national adaptation priorities. So you can as you're thinking of preparing an application submission to AFCIA, look at your most updated information on NDCs, the national determined contributions of your country, on your national adaptation plans, on the climate change strategy for the country, at the adaptation responses the country has prioritized, and really link your proposal to those priorities. Now, some of the proposals, they didn't have a clear problem statement. The problem was it was hard to see what challenges the proposals wanted to address. So here my recommendation is just make an effort to really see and discuss with stakeholders and discuss with colleagues and see what are really the problem that you're trying to address, and is that a problem that is a concern and that can be by resolving it, you would increase resilience, you will build resilience, and so working on climate change adaptation. And but finally, I just want to highlight that some of them, the activities proposed were not clearly aimed at developing or testing innovative technology solutions or approaches to build resilience. They were a package of the activities focused mainly on procurement, or sometimes just capacity building, raising awareness. So this first round, I think it helps future applicants to avoid these common mistakes. Now looking ahead at next steps for selected project ideas, we are now discussing and selecting consortium partners, Ctcn consortium partners, to refine these requests to develop project concept notes. Once project concept notes are developed, they will be once again evaluated to see that they really fit AFCIA's goals. And if not, they may still draw to the regular Ctcn track. We hopefully not. We're very confident that these two selected submissions for Nepal and Maldives will go forward. And as they go forward, after the evaluation of the response plan, terms of reference will be generated, and we will enter into open bidding to select a network member that could work, that will work with the NDE, with the designated authority for adaptation, and with the project component to implement the AFCIA project. So this is the way forward for the two selected AFCIA applications. Now, some final thoughts. The deadline for the second AFCIA call is coming up, is on the 30th of April, like my colleague Oasis mentioned. And I just cannot emphasize enough how important it is that you engage the national designated authority and the designated authority for adaptation in your countries early on. Avoid last-minute rush to submit. In this first call, we had a rush of submissions just as it barely entered the weekend. The deadline was on a weekend, and on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we received the most of the submissions. So don't leave it for the last minute. As you submit, or if you submit early, you can reach out to us as soon as you can, so we can help you. We can detect in our pre-screening. We will let you know if everything is okay, if we have time to do so. So if you keep it to the last minute, that will not be possible. And please interact with us. We have a team ready to help you in Asia Pacific, and our colleagues from other regions as well. So please contact us and if you have any questions. And also, we're looking at Ctcn will be working with partners to design and roll out capacity building support to targeted countries and regions, such as Asia Pacific region. So please let us know your ideas on how best to help you identify and assess innovative adaptation practices, products, and technologies. And I think with this, I will leave it, and I'm sure we'll have a great session and panel discussion in front of us. And please put any questions on the chat. Thank you, Karina. Over to you.
Thank you, Clara. Very interesting to hear about the two submissions from the Maldives and Nepal, what they'll be working on, and also good to hear that several of the submissions are also now being looked at to be taken up as Ctcn technical assistance. So that's nice that they may have a future in terms of further technical assistance. So now I'd like to introduce Mr. Alois Malanga, who will be moderating our panel discussion. And Alois is the Chief of the Climate Technology and Innovation Division at UNIDO. UNIDO is also a co-host of the Ctcn. And Alois has many years of experience in fostering innovation through the UNIDO's Global Clean Tech Innovation Program. So he's really well placed to lead this discussion today. And I'm looking forward to hearing the insights of all of the panelists. So I'm looking to hand it over to you, Alois, and you can get the discussion underway.
Hi, Karina, and good afternoon, good morning, colleagues. I just wanted to start this discussion by citing some of the figures and some of the statistics that were highlighted by my colleagues from UNEP. First of all, the fact that the adaptation needs at the moment are estimated in developing countries at around $70 billion US. This figure is expected to reach around 150 to 300 billion by 2030 and to double by 2050. What is also critical for us to note is the fact that most of the public financing is going into mitigation rather than adaptation. And therefore, the need for innovation is quite important to unlock, also to catalyze private sector engagement into the adaptation space. For those of us who are watching what is happening also in the mitigation, I just wanted to let you to inform you about something. Just this week, what happened in Saudi Arabia, from a public procurement process of solar PV, they managed to get a price of 1 US cent per kilowatt hour. If you watch the statistics, around the same week last year, it was 2 cents per kilowatt hour. That means to say that in 12 months, the cost of public procured solar, the lowest is decreased by 50%. Why is this important? To me, it talks to years and years of investment in innovation in finance, innovation in policy, innovation in regulation, innovation in technology. And these are I think, in my view, the dynamism around innovation that we need to bring or to learn from as we discuss adaptation. The panel discussion today is going to explore different dimensions of innovative adaptation technologies, including perspectives on technology, policy, financing, and gender, and we provide examples from growing diversity of innovative adaptation solutions in the Asia-Pacific region. And on the panel today, Ms. Alisa Gomez, who is a climate change analyst from the Adaptation Fund, Professor Kyung Woong Kim, who is the director in the International Environment Research Institute, and Mr. Nand Agrawal, who is a project coordinator in ICIMOD, Professor Salim Haq, who is director at ICCCAD, and my colleague Muhammad, who is the head of business at IC AgroLink Limited. All these colleagues brings unique perspectives on adaptation and also their lessons learned in trying to promote innovative adaptation technologies. Having said this, let me take the opportunity to invite the first speaker, Ms. Alisa Gomez, to share with us a bit about what the Adaptation Fund is doing in this space. And Alisa, the question which I would want you to address is, please tell us a bit more about the work of the Adaptation Fund in promoting innovative adaptation technologies, technology projects and programs in different sectors. In your view, what are the key emerging lessons that you can share with us? Alisa.
Thank you, Alois. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, participants and colleagues. I'm pleased to share with you a few examples from the AF portfolio. In the interest of time, without much further ado, I'm going to start with the case studies themselves. when evaluating what qualifies as an innovation for the Adaptation Fund, the following types of activities with the potential to build adaptive capacity and reduce vulnerability apply. However, it's important to mention it's not only limited to these types of activities. The first being new, adapted, or improved approaches, technologies, or mechanisms. They could also be new ways of addressing systemic, social, and environmental issues, or it might be adaptation finance. Let's look at the first case study from the AF project in Vietnam that is being implemented by UN Habitat, the United Nations Human Settlements Program. So this project in Vietnam, which is in the urban development, but also in the coastal zone sectors, is a project that is addressing two primary concerns: salt water intrusion as well as coastal erosions. And among the range of interventions being proposed, an innovative component worth mentioning is that it is an adaptation of a proven innovative technology, in this case, ElastoCoast or BioCoast, for coastal protection in a new context, where it is being designed to not only reinvigorate the ecosystem, but also to ensure social and economic benefits. And moreover, the materials themselves that form the ElastoCoast have been evaluated by the private sector, and studies show that there is no threat to the aquaculture environment. Therefore, the project, while also plays an important role in encouraging and improving livelihoods. For example, in this specific region, settlements are practicing aquaculture, that is shrimp and shellfish farming, but also agriculture. A unique component of the project is also the fact that it employs a process called the people's process, where not only in project formulation did it engage with vulnerable communities, but it also helped in forming groups to implement a project and also monitor various activities, and these groups being communities at the local level. So in this sense, this project really stands out because it is collaborating with vulnerable communities to combine their understanding of the land with the new intervention being proposed. The next case study is the Small Innovation Grant in Armenia that was approved last year. And the title of the project is Engaging Future Leaders, Digital Education Model on Adaptation Challenges and Best Practices. Over here, the innovation process is about bringing an existing technology and concept, that is online digital education, to a new context of enhancing the skills of youth on climate change adaptation in Armenia. This could be considered a diffusion innovation where an existing technology, that is digital education, is repurposed, that is digital gamification of educational modules for high school students, and then diffused into a different context, that is youth in Armenia. The proposed triangular approach of linking national climate adaptation priorities with international best practices through the prism of environmental challenges is really an excellent platform for teaching youth about effective and efficient adaptation practices, as well as it ensures scaling up. An important element in this project, and this ties in with the importance of having learning loops and feedback loops in innovation projects, is the large-scale testing of the design educational gamified solutions and collecting feedback for further advancement, which is an extremely important component. Furthermore, through knowledge sharing and dissemination, this project is specifically allowing a cross-fertilization of ideas and concepts to create new climate adaptation solutions that might be future interventions. The proposal has something called an adaptation experimental lab, where youth are invited to present proposals, and from those proposals, 10 winning proposals would be selected, And the knowledge from those proposals would then be disseminated to a wider audience representing central and regional authorities, international organizations, donor agencies that are also active in the field of environment, civil society organizations, and other partners. If successful, it would lead to the development of novel solutions, which may result in new innovations in the country. Moving on to the third example, and this is in line with the fact that innovation can also be a process of social development changes. This project is one of the first approved projects in Pakistan. And the project is titled Reducing Risks and Vulnerabilities from Glacial Lake Outburst Floods in Northern Pakistan. This 2-year pilot project helped communities by implementing downstream mitigation structures to reduce the vulnerability of exposed mountain communities to GLOF hazards. One of the innovations that was established was the first ever community-based disaster risk management community in the Chitral Adbindu Gol Valley, as well as the first community-based hazard watch groups that were developed. Furthermore, the project also tested approaches with dual benefits of mainstreaming GLOF issues in development planning and increase awareness at the local level, from the local level to the national level. This project can be considered a social innovation, but also transformative, because the innovative approaches, particularly involving community members in EWS establishment and management, could be expanded within the region and be replicated elsewhere in the country. Besides Pakistan, the learning from this project was useful to other countries with the same kind of risks from glacial lake outburst floods. Hence, for replication to other areas, this project specifically disseminated lessons learned through an international GLOF conference to a wider audience, including international networks such as the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, UNEP, etc. Finally, one of the deliverables of the project was a replication and scaling up proposal. This project especially demonstrated very well a vision of scale of impact. And what I mean by this is that the focus was on the impact of the innovation rather than solely on the innovation per se. It recognized also very early on that for a long-term vision of scale, the question of financing had to be addressed. Lastly, the multi-stakeholder alliances formed from the local, provincial, and national to international level, as well as different sectors such as the government, organizations, civil society, businesses, etc., were critical elements for scaling up the project. This project has indeed been scaled up by the GCF. In this next slide, I'll talk about how low-tech revival of traditional indigenous knowledge as well as indigenous tools repurpose is also considered an innovative solution for the Adaptation Fund. For the project in Indonesia that is titled Enhancing the Adaptive Capacity of Coastal Communities in the Maluku province of Indonesia, the project is piloting a solution that is both a low-tech revival of embedded conservation practices, that is specifically the Sasi Laut customary law in the region, and also social innovation that is encouraging and improving better livelihoods. Its benefits include the reinvigoration of the ecosystem and also cultural knowledge capture and dissemination. Sasi law is a prohibition against the overutilization of certain marine resources as a conservation effort in order to maintain the quality and population of these natural resources. By integrating modern technology such as satellite remote sensing together with field research and traditional knowledge and customary law, enabled the project to respond to the needs of vulnerable fisher communities in 3 target villages of this project. Through the integration of modern technology and traditional wisdom, the project will develop a map of fishing grounds, distribution points, and an updated fishing season calendar that will help fishermen. The Sasi lot under this project will also be stipulated as a village regulation under the project, because it's an extremely effective tool or method to socialize regulations and provisions regarding calendars and capture zones. Another project that is titled Climate Change Adaptation in Oasis zones in Morocco is an innovation that is based on indigenous practices that it brings back. The project in this case has specifically turned to a traditional system of underwater canals called Ketara, first developed by the indigenous Berber people about 2,000 years ago. The ancient Katara or rain groundwater collection system, originally dug in the 1st century, was still partly functioning at the time the project was designed. So under the project, it had been rebuilt, enhanced, and expanded for agricultural irrigation and community use as a key aspect of the project. So it helps solve the problem in a very simple and effective way. And furthermore, by working together with the natural ecosystem, the project helps save the oasis in a sustainable way. To reverse the trends of drying palm groves, overexploitation of groundwater resources, and degraded water resources, the project aims to preserve palm trees and ensures drinking water supplies. Finally, moving on to my last example, and this is within the field of innovative finance. The Adaptation Fund does consider adaptation finance pilots in insurance, microfinance to be innovative. So the project that is being discussed here is a project in Georgia that is titled Developing Climate Resilient Flood and Flash Flood Management Practices to Protect Vulnerable Communities in Georgia. The objective of the project is to help the government and populations of the Rioni River Basin to develop adaptive capacity and embark on climate resilient economic development. The project is specifically considered a pioneer, not just because of the specific approaches, but also because of the specific design of the project. One component that is noteworthy to mention is the community-based flood insurance scheme that was designed and implemented underneath the project, because it calculates loss to be insured within each flood insurance zone based on a risk model and flood zoning, and the associated payouts that should be made in each event to each flood receptor. The insurance scheme that had been developed is a weather-based index insurance. It also developed direct interventions for long-term flood protection and risk mitigation. The project further reviewed and changed land use regulations for adaptation and established systems at the national and subnational level led by the National Environment Agency for long-term and short-term flood forecasting. It led to the government of Georgia redeveloping a nationwide multi-hazard early warning system. The experience and results of the project also contributed to follow-up actions outside of the project, with the government applying some of the experiences to the recovery work of the 2015 Tbilisi floods. Furthermore, residents and community members also consider the ecosystem-based practices that they learned to prevent floods to be new for that context. The project thus offers a systems innovation. The approach of the project highlighted the interconnected nature of the problems faced. It also acknowledged that the proposed solutions, that is EWS and EBA, can only partially solve the problems, acknowledging that the opportunities for other solutions are needed as well. This project is also being scaled up by the GCF, and it's also co-financed by the government of Georgia as well as Switzerland. Therefore, in summary, I would like to say that innovation under the Adaptation Fund can be the application of physical tools, structures, processes, knowledge, and skills with the aim of building resilience and adapting to climate change. Secondly, as innovation is about bringing about change, it should involve the renewing, advancing, and changing of the way things are done. In line with the Adaptation Fund's mission, all adaptation and innovations in the projects that we discuss deliver a result that has positive impact on the lives of the most vulnerable communities. And this brings to the third element and the last element, which is that innovation is a process of translating an idea or an invention into a valuable good and service. With this, I will end my presentation. Thank you for listening. And as you can see, I have put up here the contacts of the innovation team. So please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alisa. I really appreciate your sharing with us the various forms of innovation that the Adaptation Fund is supported. Next on the panel is Professor Kyung Woon Kim. Sorry if I did not pronounce your name very well. He's a director of International Environment Research Institute. And Professor, thanks for agreeing to share with us your innovation. You are quite aware that the water sector is highly vulnerable to climate change, and access to potable water is increasingly becoming a challenge in the region. May you tell us a bit about your experience in developing the graphic-driven membrane technology and share your experiences from the case studies that you have had? Thank you.
Thank you, Alois. Your pronunciation was perfect to pronounce my name. Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes, please.
Okay, so today I would like to introduce our gravity-driven membrane technology. We have several case studies, but today I will introduce two case studies. One is the application to Cambodia and Indonesia from the KUNDP project. And another case is the provision of large-scale and small-scale GDM to Kiribati. That is very small island in Pacific. The funding source is Korean government. Okay. So first of all, I would like to introduce the mechanism or principle of our gravity-driven membrane technology. Here you can see the membrane is composed of small pore. The size of pore is 10 to minus 6 or down to 10 to minus 9 meter. And this membrane is very simple, physical separation technique. If contaminant is bigger than pores, it cannot pass. So only the small particle, which is smaller than pore, can pass. So water molecule can pass this pore, but some contaminant, including bacteria, virus, and heavy metals cannot be passed. Here you can see, depending on the size of the contaminant, here you can see bacteria, virus, and something. If we apply microfiltration technique, we can remove 99.99% of bacteria. Here you can see actual picture of GDM in laboratory. This is filter set inside the tank. The advantage of this technique is we have final product, or we can install our membrane into any kind of container. It takes only 5 minutes. So you can see schematic diagram of our GDM system. This is the case study for the sustainable drinking water supply in Cambodia. So we brought the small scale GDM, that is the family size. So the water flow is 15 liters per hour. But when you visit the Cambodia, many schools, they have this kind of the water storage tank. So they store the rainwater. They use this water for drinking purpose. So we visited these 3 schools and installed bigger size membrane inside this tank. Another case study is large-scale GDM installation in Kiribati. Kiribati is very small island in Pacific region. So population is 100,000 only, and Kiribati is coral island. So you can imagine how bad their water security in this country. So they have this size of water storage tank. Is up to 5 ton, 7 ton, and 10 ton. Inside this tank, we install this large size membrane. So here you can see the water quality inside tank was really bad. So they never cleaned this water storage tank. Here you can see before the treatment by membrane, water quality was really bad. Here you can see plenty numbers of coliform, E. coli, and aerobic bacteria. After filtration, the water flow is very fast and it's very clean. So the residents in Kiribati use rainwater for their drinking water without any treatment. After we install this system, they have the very good quality of drinking water. Before we install this system, the mortality rate among children under age 5 in Kiribati was 47 per 1,000, but mainly this is related with the waterborne disease using the consuming contaminated water. So this system may enhance the life quality in the resident in Kiribati. And this is the last slide. So I should explain why this technology is innovative. The first one is no electricity is needed. The driving force of this system is gravity, the weight of water. So we do not need any electricity. Also, we have this kind of final product, or we can install this membrane inside any size of tank. And this is effective against bacteria. So we can remove 99.99% of bacteria without any electricity. And no maintenance is needed. If we install this system in remote area, nobody can approach, so we cannot guarantee maintenance. But this system, we can use this system at least 10 years without maintenance. Finally, no other cost is needed for this system. So for the upgrade of our system, we will set up the online remote monitoring of water quality. So if there is any chance, I will explain the system later. Before finishing, I would like to show one video clip. We tested this GDM system in Fiji Island. So you can see this short video clip. This is water before the treatment. And we have this clean water. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor. I really, appreciate your technology and how it could make potable water available to a lot of communities that are affected by the climate change in climate. The next in line is Mr. Nand Kishore Agrawal. He's a project coordinator from ICMOD. I watched, interestingly, we watched the recent devastating glacial floods in Uttarakhand, shows the effect of climate change in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. Please share with us some of the work that you are doing to promote innovative adaptive technologies adaptation technologies in the region.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Lots of greetings from Himalayan mountain, Nepal, India, Bhutan, Bangladesh, some of the countries where we work. First of all, thank you Ctcn for inviting me for this very interesting and relevant event. Promoting innovation in adaptation is really the need of the hour. There are so many good examples. We need innovation in how to scale these innovative examples. So I think this event and also the AFCIA approach is really contributing a lot to this process. And so I'm really happy to be presenting at this prestigious forum some of the experiences that we had. At ICIMOD, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, we have developed a number of technologies and solutions jointly with our partners. But in the interest of the time, I will be sharing only 2 examples. And these 2 examples are very innovative, yet very simple, and more importantly, they are very inclusive. They are for actually women and youth and the people who are not generally included in the development process. And also they are very affordable. So scalability is very, very high. So let me come directly to the example. My slide is clearly visible?
Yes, please.
Okay, that's great. So the first example that we have is what we call bio inputs to the agriculture, and locally called a jholmol. So it's very easy to know. It becomes very popular by the name also. It's easy to pronounce. So this is a simple traditional technology where people in the region, they make a biopesticide and biofertilizer at home. So what we did, we backed this with a lot of science and brought in a lot of innovation in the process of making this. And this resulted in wide application, like really outscaling of the solution to a very large number of people. The region that they knew a little bit about it, they learned a little bit more about it, and then they applied. And this, what it requires is just simply locally available plant material, animal excreta, and also some water, of course, and then some microbes which are easily available in the market in a predefined ratio. And they had to be fermented for 10 days, 15 days, or 1 month, depending upon what actually we want as an output. It has reduced the cost of production by substituting synthetic chemical input. So that way it also contributes to mitigation. We have clear data results that it has improving. So generally when you move from chemical to non-chemical, the productivity decreases. But in this case, the productivity is increasing, and particularly because the pest infestation is very, very low. It has huge potential and very easy for uptake by women farmers, not only in the mountain areas, but even beyond mountain. But it is interesting only for small farmers. It's not interesting for farmers who have 30, 40 hectares of land. But people who are having 1 or 2 hectares of land and dependent on agriculture, for them it's very, very interesting. And it safeguards environment and human health. So the innovation here is that we conducted a number of trials using various combinations. So nowadays we are going through this COVID menace, and then we have a lot of vaccines coming up with multiple trials everywhere. So that's what exactly we did here. There's so many different kind of trials, and then based on certain trials, certain results, we recommend this to farmers, that what dose can be given. And as you can see, I took just one example, although there are a number of examples, that it increases the overall efficacy of the result of in terms of production. So the productivity for different type of jholmol has increasing, and it has got different dimensions to it. So one can decide that which type of jholmol should be applied to which crop. So, but in all the cases, the productivity increases. And then the pest infestation, you can see in the lower part of the slide, compared to conventional method of pest treatment. Here, the infestation itself is low because it prevents, it doesn't let the pest come. So unlike in chemical ones, when the pest is there, then it is applied. This is applied as a preventive, so that really helps. So that's one example which has been taken up in Nepal, Bhutan, India, and many other countries are in the process of learning this, and we are trying to promote this as a very simple solution without much of investment. The only challenge is that there's not much investment. So people don't really find it so exciting, particularly those who are into project and want to invest a lot of money. So here it's a simple, the investment has to be in the process. The second example that I have is springs in the mountain region. There are estimated in the mountain of Himalayas, 8 countries, there are estimated 240 million people who live in the Himalayan region. Out of those 240 million people, almost 100 million people in the mid hills part of the Himalayas, they depend on natural springs for their domestic and agricultural water needs. And what is happening due to climate change and other many other factors, the springs are really drying, and the springs contributing to the domestic and agriculture needs, but they also contribute a lot to biodiversity, to sustain the biodiversity, cultural services. But because they are drying very quickly, very fast, almost 50% of the springs are either dried up or become seasonal. So this is something which has not come onto the radar of the development practitioners or even climate adaptation practitioners, because again, this is small thing. They think that, okay, one spring, 100 people are dependent, so what to do with it? But if we look at the entire picture, it has got a tremendous potential of changing the water scenario in the Himalayan region, in the upstream, mid hills, and also in the downstream. So what do we do? This can be revived. Despite the challenges, it can be revived. So what innovation we brought in? We jointly with our partners came up with what we call it 6-step process, which basically uses a watershed approach, but adds aquifer or say geohydrological assessment, that how the water is flowing beneath the surface. Because above the surface, it may have one direction, but beneath the surface, it can have another direction. So that assessment is done, and it sounds very technical, but local people can easily be trained on making that assessment. And then how each of these springs can be managed locally with little bit of investment in terms of recharge measures, that how springs can be recharged, and with say local municipal level officers, local municipality level, even local village level, it is possible to, with little bit of support, it is possible to revive those springs. And just imagine, around 7 to 8 million springs are there in the Himalayan region. If all of them are revived, the river flow will change in such a positive way for the entire Asia. So that's the kind of contribution it can make. And so we have developed this manual, we call it 6-step protocol, and that is available to download, and we will be happy to share more about it. So these 2 examples I wanted to share, and what it has led to is basically very clearly production side, income, safe food, nutrition security. Ecosystem side, it has improved soil, much more water is available. And on women inclusion side, gender and social inclusion side, a lot of information, women leadership has come, and access to resources. So that's the kind of contribution it is making. And again, I want to emphasize the fact that they are very simple yet innovative solutions that can be scaled on its own with just little bit of support, because in mountains you cannot reach. You can see a village by just a kilometer away, but you cannot reach. It takes 2 days to reach that village because of the topography. So using this simple technology where they themselves can do is the most important part of it. So I stop here. It's really short time, so I don't want to go beyond this, but I will be happy to contribute more as discussion goes on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Quite appreciate your presentation. It is a fact that we are way behind, we are way ahead, behind in terms of time. But so I would want to encourage the next 2 presenters to sort of stick to the 2 to 3 minutes. The next one is Professor Mulhack, who is the director at ICCCAD. Professor, welcome to the session. Please tell us about your work in improving saline-tolerant varieties of rice in Bangladesh, and how was the private sector involved in disseminating the varieties to the farmers? In your view, what will it take to scale up this success story across the region?
Thank you very much, Alice, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to participate in this excellent meeting. I would like to speak not about a very specific technology, but about the issue of scaling up, which has been mentioned a number of times by many of the speakers here. Because unless we are able to scale up, we are never going to be able to tackle climate change at the pace at which it is taking place. And so I definitely support the accelerator intention, and I will focus on the word acceleration, because unless we are able to effectively accelerate, doing lots of small, very good actions, activities, and deploying technologies at small scale are really not going to be sufficient. So I will share three lessons that I have learned over doing this for the last 20 years. The first one is that with adaptation, it is always extremely context specific, and all the examples we just heard from the excellent presentations showed us very specific examples of things that can be done. These are all very good, very important. Some of them can be replicated at scale, but the most important thing is how do we share this knowledge across, within a country, across countries, across continents to the rest of the world. And we have to get better at doing that, because specific issues in one place may or may not work in another place, but knowledge of how to do things, how to adapt, can actually scale up. And that's one of the things that my center has been doing. We run a platform called Gobeshona, which is Bangla for research. And every January, we have a major conference, which this year, last January, we made into a global conference on sharing experience of locally led adaptation across the world. We ran it for 7 days, 24 hours a day. We had more than 90 sessions all the way from the Pacific, Australia, Japan, Asia, Africa, Europe, and Americas, North, South, and Central, sharing local experiences with each other and learning from each other. And I think that really needs to be a key element in scaling up. The other key element in scaling up is going to be in accessing finance. And while it is very good to have specialized funds, the Adaptation Fund, the Fund for the Accelerator, these kinds of specialized funds are useful for doing experiments and case studies, but they are not going to be able to be scaled up. They're never going to be multiplied by 1,000,000 times by any donor. So we have to access the big money that is available in the national exchequers, the national budgets of governments. We have to convince governments that this is something that they should be doing. So this is scaling upwards. So there are two aspects of scaling up. There's scaling out, which is replicating what you are doing in one place into many different places, hundreds, thousands, millions of places. And then scaling up is taking a local level activity and taking it up the decision-making tree, particularly at the national scale where national budgets are put together, where the national finance minister has to be convinced that this is something that the government should be putting in money to scale it out. And in Bangladesh, we have done that. And that's the example that you mentioned of scaling up saline-tolerant varieties of rice. This is now being practiced by millions of farmers in millions of hectares. The national budget of Bangladesh has a climate change budget, which is nearly 8% of the national budget is to support climate change adaptation across 20 ministries in the country. And that is really where we need to be reaching. We need to be scaling up and scaling out at scale. And I commend the initiative of AFCIA as well as Ctcn, and would be very happy to discuss with you afterwards how we can improve our ability to scale up and scale out, because unfortunately that's not happening. Lots of good examples, but they are not scaling up and scaling out as effectively as they should do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. I mean, I think what you mentioned is quite important, scaling up and scaling out. Let me take this opportunity to invite Muhammad. In as much as the governments can provide the funding, the private sector has a role in actually bringing in the money to scale up some of these initiatives. ACI, I mean, is globally recognized in aquaculture. how have you made your operations resilient to climate change? And please help us share with us how this has helped local communities.
Thank you very much. I'll directly go to my slides. Today we'll talk about how ACI is tackling some of the climate challenges in coastal areas of Bangladesh. If I can be very specific about the kind of challenges that shrimp farmers in the coastal regions are facing, maybe some of you know very well that there is frequent cyclone and tidal waves. These are wiping out many of the shrimp farms every year. There is extreme temperature variability, which changes the digestion system of the shrimp, and in many cases the shrimp cannot grow for a particular time. So that is a very vulnerable situation. Then there is heavy rainfall in the southern area, where when the salinity goes down, many shrimp, the small shrimp, they die before the maturation. There is also lack of forecasted data with the farmers, so that they don't understand when do they take what kind of measures. So that is also there, and there's kind of climate challenge they face. There is lack of education, and all this together basically it's declining the national production of shrimp in our country. As a result, the processors like us, we cannot get appropriate supply for our factory, and our production capacity goes down, and as a result, our export goes down. So basically, to tackle these challenges, we have taken the measures and came up with this idea of climate resilient sustainable shrimp value chain in Bangladesh. We have already started the operation of this climate adaptive farming, inbound logistics, processing and export of shrimp to global market. We have this is a very mature project, and now we wait for further expansion, and we are seeking new funds to intervene in some of the areas called climate resilient supply chain, then in the cold chain, in the quality control system, automation and IT infrastructure of our factory, and also in the water skill development. There are several innovations that actually we have targeted to implement for our farmers in the logistics supply chain and also in the factory. I don't want to go in details because it's, there is a time constraint, but you can see some of them, they are very common, and some of them, those are actually done by ACI. For example, the IDS, the one that actually farmers cannot get the satellite-based data. So we have a system through which actually we can give satellite data to the farmers. So that kind of, these are the kind of innovations that actually we are implementing through this climate resilient sustainable shrimp value chain. And it is a very popular, I mean, it is getting popular, the idea, and we have received the Dutch fund from climate development. They have funded us to pilot this project, and we are into the process. So this is under this project, actually, we are seeking joint venture funds from global investors, where we can actually roll out this big project through around 18,000 hectares of land. So that's the kind of target we are having. If you can just see the impact that actually we are forecasting from this kind of intervention, that includes the first of all, as a business, as we are I mean, we have to work for the profitability of the business, and this business basically will increase the capacity utilization of the shrimp of our factory. So that is the number one that motivates us to actually invest in this backward linkage development. Then we will be having this is very important. This is building the climate and disaster resilient shrimp value chain, so that throughout the year we have a constant supply of shrimp for our factory. And also the joint venture will give us foster the global technology adoption. And that actually we want to do that, how we can bring more technologies for our farmers and disseminate them so that we have our farmers can become a global supplier. And finally, as you know that most of our shrimp farmers, they are women. So they're promoting the woman empowerment. It's also a key component of our project. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mohammed. I mean, you bring in a different perspective to, I mean, to this panel. I mean, colleagues on the panel, the organizers have been so kind to give us 5 more minutes to finish this conversation. So I'm just going to give you, each one of you, one question, and please summarize. Summarize your intervention in within a minute. Let me start with Alisa. Thanks a lot, I think, for financing, for supporting this initiative. Let's talk about the future. I think I was listening to the recent, recently elected, Adaptation Fund board chair. He says that the future is growth, continued growth and innovation. What is the future? What is Adaptation Fund planning to do in the future?
Thank you, Alois. As Miko had mentioned in his opening remarks, as a starting point, we have opened up a new window for funding, that is the Innovation Large Grants. And a key component of the Innovation Large Grants that relates to the midterm strategy of the fund is to scale up interventions. And so it's an enabling process to kickstart the scaling up and roll out of successful innovations. So from that perspective, the fund has developed certain criteria to help proponents develop proposals, keeping in mind these key elements such as scaling up, as well as knowledge management, lessons learned through the interventions, which is an extremely important element for innovation specifically. Some questions that might help proponents, especially when it comes to scaling up a project, is to ask what is the potential for scaling up, and acknowledge whether there is an evidence base at that point, and is the project deriving its chosen intervention from an existing evidence base, or does it choose to create an evidence base that can be then used by other funds or by other proponents to scale up specific projects? Another question that could be asked is, are processes in place to build an evidence base for scaling up of appropriate technologies, processes, as well as methods and approaches, and capture any scalable components that they have developed? Lastly, does the project include a vision for scaling up? And does it involve self-financing of the product or service, or will it require a sustained budgetary financing, including subsidies, and to really assess the viability of sustaining the intervention? I will stop here.
Thanks a lot, Alisa. Let me quickly go to Professor Kim. I like the gravity-driven membrane technology that you have developed. Any further refinement to the technology, and how are we going to get this to the market at scale up?
Yeah, so I think the price is very important. So at this moment, our small scale is $200, but if we can produce more, maybe we can decrease the price down to $100. But you can use more than 10 years with $100. And another point is the scale up for the target contaminant. Our system can remove the most of bacteria, but in the Southeast Asian country near the Mekong River, they have high arsenic enriched groundwater. So if we use nano scale system, nano filtration system, we can remove the arsenic and other heavy metals in drinking water. So to reduce the more price and to produce more water, if we can install our system into bigger scale tank, maybe we have more water, then one village can share this system in future. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor. And let me go to Mr. Agrawal. Youth and women, how were they involved in your projects, and what were the lessons from that?
Well, I think there are a 4-step process that we followed. One was that engage them, women and youth, and excluded people in the integrating research, so that the knowledge is generated jointly, and there's a much more ownership of that knowledge that is generated at the local level, contextual, to make it very, very contextual. Second, that develop the women capacity, particularly of the women, keeping them as a risk and resource manager, that they are the ones in the mountain. There's a lot of migration, men out migration is happening. So they have become risk and resource manager. So providing capacity training to them on that, from that perspective, that they have to manage it. The third and quite important is that building institutional capacities of the institutions around that area, even at a district level or provincial level, because the extension workers are all men and it's women who are doing the farming. So the capacity, we cannot change the staff composition overnight, but the capacity has to be developed. They have to be sensitized. So that is a very, very important part of it to really ensure the solutions are used. And then develop and promote simple technologies that are very easy to use by women, and they are very attractive to use by young people, because they don't want to come to agriculture, but if there are very nice way and it's attractive, then they would come. So that is the 4-step process. Challenge that comes all the time is that it's such a slow process, and particularly working with government, and you really want to change something, and then by the time you work with them, the officer itself had changed, moved to another place. So that becomes a continuous process to help them understand the gender dimension, social inclusion dimension, and not just go by the numbers and targets. So that's the main challenge that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let me quickly give I think 1 minute to Professor. Sorry, Professor, for being a bit mean. 1 minute. I like your third point where you say you've managed to work with the governments to actually provide funding for adaptation. In 1 minute, please share with us, how did you manage to do this? This is very critical because we need adaptation to be mainstreamed into the national development processes, and also to help from the national fiscus. How did you manage to do this? What were the key steps steps that you take to ensure that the government mainstreams adaptation planning and financing?
Well, first of all, you have to be persistent and not give up, because in the beginning you will not succeed. You have to keep on trying. And eventually you will succeed, and Bangladesh is a good example of that. I have actually shared in the chat box a link to my regular op-ed column. I write a column on climate change every week in the main newspaper in Bangladesh called Daily Star, which is read by everybody. All the policymakers read my column, and in it I give them suggestions on things that they can do, and very often they get picked up by those policymakers. Within my minute, if I can also make another offer to everybody on this call, particularly those of you who are working on locally led adaptation at the local level in any of the countries. I am very interested in knowing who those local level adaptation leaders are. I want to know them. I want to talk to them. I want to tell their stories, and I want to invite them to join our conference next January, Gobeshona conference. And so I'm making an appeal to everybody. You've got my email on the screen under my face. Send me an email. Get in touch with me, and then I will follow up with you. And I would like you to introduce me to people on the ground who are actually doing the adaptations. Not all of you who are funding them or supporting them, but the people who are doing it. I'd like their names. I'd like to contact them. I'd like to tell their stories. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor. Muhammad, let me come to you. You brought in a very interesting perspective, the role of private sector. With us here are people from International Financing Organization, people who have managed to work with the government. What is required by the private sector to invest in adaptation at scale? You have a minute, perhaps give us 3 points.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's a very good question. First of all, in our country, we also have practice like this public-private partnership, the PPP project concept, where the government can share their infrastructure, and also private sector can invest their knowledge, and they can actually form this kind of projects, and they can actually go for very large-scale implementation. That is also very important. Second one is the government universities. They're coming up with new technologies. In our university, they come up with a lot of, particularly for the coastal regions, and they don't have the vehicle to commercialize this technology to the farmers. But private sector has this vehicle, and private sector can take this technology and actually really reach to the people where that will be actually implemented. So that kind of partnership can be done. And finally, I can also say that there should be a lot of this kind of roadshow where actually private sector and government can come together and discuss how these technologies can be developed and how these technologies can be shared with the people. So these are the areas that actually government can do what I believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, panelists, I would want to appreciate the time that you have spent sharing with us your rich experiences. across across your sectors and your areas of expertise. I will not try to summarize all the points, the rich points that you have mentioned. I think the perception that I get here is that we are on the verge of adaptation economy, and we need to seize the moment to focus much more on systems innovation to innovate across various parameters to ensure that we are able to bring all these innovations to the market at scale and ensure that we promote resilience in all our sectors. That said, I would want to hand over to Karina, but before that, I want to thank all the panelists who shared their expertise on this panel, from Alisa from Gomez from Adaptation Fund, Professor Kyung-Woon Kim from GIST, Mr. Nand Agrawal from ICIMOD, Professor Salim Haq from ICCAD, and Muhammad Saifullah, who is the head of business from IC AgroLink. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to share with us your expertise. Karina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alois, and all of the panelists. It was really a lot of interesting insight and excellent examples that were shared. And we'll be making these presentations available on the Ctcn website after this event, so that those of you who are participating and want to read a little bit more through the presentations are able to do so. So now I'd like to ask the Ctcn director, Rose Morbaza, to provide us with some last closing remarks today. And I'll hand it over to you, Rose. See here.
Thank you very much, Karina. I would like to start really by thanking Lloyd for facilitating. I'll start with the end, the last part of our conversation, because as you know, Ctcn is a partnership entity, and it was deliberately set up by the members, by the member states in the UNFCCC to implement its work around a network of private sector and non-private sector entities. And what our partners have done in that segment is really demonstrate what working together between the UN, governments, and other actors who are non-state actors, including the private sector, can do. And so how do we accelerate, especially adaptation technologies, as part of the wider work we need to do on climate change is very important. And then I'd like to go back to the beginning to talk about the partnership between UNDP, the Ctcn, and UNEP, and then our funding partner, the Adaptation Fund. This is a very complementary partnership. It also speaks to the work that we do at the Ctcn as a mechanism of the UNFCCC to be able to bring together this partnership. What is particularly important is that while our work is designed to respond through the NDCs, who are government entities, UNDP offers us in this partnership the possibility to go beyond the national designated entities who are focal points. And in that way, to enhance the reach in terms of the work we can do on adaptation. And in listening to Akiko, I think we see how this synergy really allows us to reach far much wider than we would have than if we worked alone. So leveraging the assets of the various institutions involved in this, I think, is what makes us fundamentally better at what we do and enables us to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. And so to reiterate the point that we made from both Clara and Hosik, but also from Akiko, that the demand is high. It is far much higher than any of our institutions are able to respond to. It's a good thing. It shows that there's a lot that can be done. And therefore, the proverbial issue of scaling up financing for adaptation remains valid today. Jessica from UNEP, that leads the work on the Adaptation Fund Gap Report, can make that point over and over again, and I think they do it, that the adaptation gap has to be closed. This is part of our contribution to closing that gap. Innovation in adaptation, especially technological innovation, can go a very long way in closing that gap. And in closing, I wanted to thank our chairperson of the advisory board, who always really takes a keen interest in the work we do, making sure that he really represents the member states in the UNFCCC in ensuring that the mandate of the technology mechanism is delivered. And that cannot be underestimated because as a mechanism of the UNFCCC, we operate at the behest of the member states, and their continued engagement and guidance is extremely important. So we thank you very much, Mr. Ping, for taking the time to join us this morning. And just to thank my colleagues who work in the Asia Pacific region, who do all the great work. They are the boots on the ground to copy an expression that UNDP often uses, since they are partners and also partners in the climate promise. That Clara and her team, it's Hosik and it's Sambit, but who work really together. That this is great work. Please do not hesitate to get in touch with any of us. We actually read all your emails and all your communications, and that partnerships are the key to the Ctcn's operations, and we look forward to your continued engagement with us. We've run out of time, so I won't say any more than that. Karina, thank you very much as always for your fabulous facilitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. And I just add my thanks to everyone today and ask you to please keep in mind that the next call for applications for the Accelerator is open until the 30th of April. So I encourage you to consider applications if you are interested in technical assistance work and more assistance in this area. And if you have any questions regarding the Accelerator or the application program, please contact either one of these emails here on the screen. This is for Clara and Hosek, and they'd be happy to discuss with you any ideas that you might have. Okay, then I thank you so much for today and wish everyone all the best. Bye.